Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama on Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. North Korea launches its most powerful intercontinental ballistic missile. Missile lands in Japanese waters, flies higher than any other missile that Pyongyang has tested. Ivanka Trump praises Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership addressing the 8th edition of the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. The advisor to US President Donald Trump says India has a true friend in the White House. India and Singapore majorly crank up their maritime security cooperation with access to each other's bases. Both nations ink a naval pact after delegation-level talks between Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and her Singapore counterpart Ng Eng Hen. And hosts Russia to kick off FIFA World Cup against Saudi Arabia, while defending champions Germany to start their campaign against Mexico. Event to begin on June 14, 2018 in Russia. Well, North Korea invited global condemnation yet again on Wednesday by launching its most powerful intercontinental ballistic missile. The country's state television said Pyongyang had achieved its mission of becoming a nuclear state. The missile landed in Japanese waters but flew higher than any other missile that the North had previously tested. Here are the details.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in on an important call with US President Trump after confirmation that North Korea had launched an intercontinental ballistic missile that landed near Japan. Moon told Trump during their call that Pyongyang's missile technology seemed to have improved. North Korea's state media made the announcement on Wednesday, hours after Kim Jong-un ordered the 3 a.m. launch of the RAUSAN missile, which reached the highest altitude ever recorded by a North Korean missile.
The ICBM RAUSAN-15 weapon system is an intercontinental ballistic rocket tipped with a super large heavy warhead, which is capable of striking the whole mainland of the US.
The launch was the first in September and came despite repeated warnings from US President Trump, who told reporters at the White House that the US will handle the situation.
These missile launches today, does it change anything about your basic approach to dealing with them?
Nothing changed. Nothing changed. We have a very serious approach and nothing changed. We take it very seriously.
US Defense Secretary James Mattis, who was with Trump at the meeting, outlined how much tougher the situation has become.
It went higher, frankly, than any previous shot they've taken. It's a research and development effort on their part to continue building ballistic missiles that could threaten everywhere in the world, basically. And in response, the South Koreans have fired some pinpoint missiles out into the water to make certain North Korean stands that they could be taken under fire by our ally.
The RAUSAN-15 soared 4,475 kilometers in the sky, spending 53 minutes in the air before splashing down in waters off the coast of Japan. Several countries, from Japan to the UK and even China, condemned the act of defiance.
The UNSC has a clear prohibition on this kind of missile launch activity by North Korea. China expresses grave concern and opposition. We strongly urge the North Korean side to abide by UNSC's relevant resolutions and cease taking actions that increase tensions on the peninsula.
North Korea fired the missile a week after Trump put it back on a US list of countries that it says support terrorism. While global leaders led by the US continue with deliberations, Hawaii on Tuesday resumed a testing of Cold War-era nuclear attack warning sirens for the first time in at least a quarter century in preparation for a possible missile strike from North Korea. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is former diplomat Ashok Sargent. Ambassador, thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
This latest test by North Korea, can it be dismissed as just another threat, or do all the stakeholders need to be concerned about what has happened?
Need to be very concerned. It cannot be dismissed as a threat. I think the missile tests that have taken place in September 15, then again in August, and even before that in July, I think all these tests have been taken, missile tests have been taken very seriously. And this latest one, as has been mentioned by your report, is the most powerful that has happened so far. The intercontinental ballistic missile traveled about 4,950 kilometers in the air. It was lofted up and then it traveled about 900 kilometers in terms of length, where the range where it went down in the exclusive economic zone of Japan. So if it had not been sent out as a lofted missile, if it had been sent out in a regular trajectory, it would have been able to travel about 13,000 kilometers, which means that the whole of United States, not only Alaska, but right up to Washington, D.C. and Europe and Australia would come within its range. So it is extremely serious, and also going with the 6th nuclear test that it had conducted, which it said was the thermonuclear test on the 3rd of September, 2.5 months, 3 months ago. This really brings it the capability of sending out a nuclear war. Of course, it's been mentioned that this missile might have carried a very light mock nuclear warhead, and to really miniaturize a nuclear warhead to fit onto an ICBM, that would require quite a bit of work still that North Korea would need to do. Yes.
Yes. You know, now Donald Trump has reacted and he has said, I'm going to take care of it. Now, what does that mean? Because sanctions clearly have not worked as far as North Korea is concerned. So is the United States now going to up the ante?
Well, this is what appears, you know, that there could be some sort of a misunderstanding. But I think the countries concerned, they still feel that a great number of sanctions have been applied. But still there is room, there is space. After all, if you look at it, oil is going from China. After all, it supplies, I think, about 520,000 barrels of oil, crude oil per year. It has been allowed to supply about 2 million barrels of petroleum, gas, etc. There are exports also that are coming out of North Korea, whether it is of armaments, whether it is of textiles, and of iron ore. For instance, you know, there were reports that Chinese imports of iron ore from North Korea had increased by 270% in January and February this year. So notwithstanding the application of all these sanctions, the trade between North Korea and China has been growing. It increased by about, I think in the first 9 months or so, it increased by about 4%. So I think sanctions need to be applied, need to be implemented. And I think some of the critical sanctions, critical items that will really go to hurt North Korea, they need to be taken up. Now, of course, some people have said...
But for all that, China holds the key at the end of the day.
It holds the key. It holds the key. So I think that is what the South Korean President Moon has said, that, you know, China needs to go further and needs really to apply pressure. And this is what the Japanese Prime Minister also said. So I think sanctions, applying sanctions, further enhancing, although we know that China and Russia want that the issue should be solved more through dialogue and consultation, because they feel that the pressures might drive North Korea against the wall. But I don't think that is really, in my view, an assessment that would be very accurate. I think more pressure needs to be applied. The flexibility that is available to North Korea, that needs to be reduced. If need be, we also need to put maybe a blockade of so that exports of North Korea can also be curtailed.
All right. Ambassador, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on now. On Tuesday, the three-day Global Entrepreneurship Summit was jointly inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and advisor to the US President Donald Trump, his daughter Ivanka, in Hyderabad. Now, the summit with a focus on women and their roles as entrepreneurs in its 8th edition was held in South Asia for the first time. The three-day event, which was focused on female entrepreneurs, was jointly hosted by India and the United States.
To my entrepreneur friends from across the globe, I would like to say, come, make in India, invest in India, for India and for the world. I invite each one of you to become a partner in India's growth story.
Pitching the country's Make in India initiative, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday invited global entrepreneurs to come to India, promising an investment-friendly environment. Speaking at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Hyderabad, Modi listed his government's achievements, saying it has succeeded in containing the fiscal and current account deficits, as well as curbing inflation.
Our government has taken several steps to improve the business environment. The jump in India's ranking in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report from 142 to 100 in 3 years is a result of these initiatives.
Speaking at the summit, advisor to US President Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump hailed India as one of the fastest growing economies in the world. She stressed on the need to bridge the gender gap in the labor force to help boost Indian economy by over $150 in the next 3 years.
Fueling the growth of women-led businesses isn't simply good for society, it's good for our economy. One study estimates that closing the gender entrepreneurship gap worldwide could grow our global GDP by as much as 2%. The women in this room can lead the way in closing that gap and ushering in a new era of greater prosperity.
Ivanka also lauded Prime Minister Narendra Modi for bringing about transformational change in India.
What you are achieving here is truly extraordinary. From your childhood selling tea to your election as India's Prime Minister, you've proven that transformational change is possible. And now you are bringing that promise to hundreds of millions of people across your country.
Earlier in the day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Ivanka Trump inaugurated the 8th Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Hyderabad. Modi also met Ivanka on the sidelines of the summit and had a productive discussion on women entrepreneurship and empowerment. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but still to come. India attends SCO Summit as a permanent member for the first time. Minister of External Affairs says terrorism can't and shouldn't be linked with any religion. That and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
A labyrinth of hundreds of narrow stairway passages is a significant and historical component of what you popularly know as Bara Imambara. Some of these narrow stairways have dead ends, some end at precipitous drops, while others lead to entrance or exit points. Historically, Bhul Bhulaiya was constructed to confuse the enemy intruder, and the narrow lanes of the labyrinth can make anyone feel lost. The structure contains various strategically built hollows in the corridors.
Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira. India and Singapore decided to work together in the Asia-Pacific region to ensure freedom of navigation in their fight against transnational terrorism. They will also coordinate with other regional countries for the smooth movement of goods and services. Defence Minister of Singapore, Ng Eng En, was in Delhi on a two-day visit earlier this week to discuss issues of mutual importance.
The defence ministers of India and Singapore held extensive talks in New Delhi on Wednesday. Both sides signed an agreement to deepen cooperation in maritime security. It is intended to ensure safety against transnational terrorism and freedom of navigation while combating chemical and biological attacks.
Signing of a Navy-to-Navy agreement today reflects our intention and commitment to further deepen cooperative endeavours in our shared maritime domain to address mutual concerns. This agreement will enable a broader range of cooperative activities between our navies, such as supporting temporary deployments for each other's naval facilities, as well as enhancing maritime domain awareness.
That we were able to decide very quickly on our approach to issues such as terrorism and maritime security, which included capabilities in responding to chemical, biological, and radiological threats, as well as the need for information sharing against the threat of terrorism. We both shared the concern with the developments in Iraq and Syria, that the theater of operations for terrorism can shift to our parts of the world.
The India-Singapore cooperation will also include coordination with other ASEAN countries for joint naval exercises.
The Defence Minister of Singapore responded positively to my proposal that we proactively move towards continuous, institutionalized naval engagements in our shared maritime space, including setting up maritime exercises with like-minded countries and our other ASEAN partners. This also reflects India's commitment to stay strongly engaged in the Asia-Pacific and the Indian Ocean region in collaboration with our friends and partners like Singapore.
Not only from the point of view of our militaries being able to respond, but to hold accountable, whether they were state-sponsored or non-state-sponsored or non-state actors, those who were responsible for the perpetration of these terrorist acts.
Both ministers also agreed to ensure greater collaboration in aerospace, electronics and other areas of mutual interest between defence industries in both countries. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, India has asked the Shanghai Cooperation Organization members to extend help to each other in combating terrorism. India has also asked the members to provide road connectivity to all other member countries for smooth flow of goods and people at affordable costs. The Indian view in the SCO was articulated in its summit-level meeting by the External Affairs Minister on Friday in Sochi.
With Pakistan in mind, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj on Friday appealed to all members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to condemn terrorism in all its forms. She also called for comprehensive cooperation in intelligence sharing to combat it.
India strongly condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. There can be no justification whatsoever for any acts of terrorism. We are determined to consistently strengthen cooperation within the SCO framework and to work together to seek comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security.
Addressing a restricted meeting of the heads of states of the SCO, Sushma Swaraj raised the issue of connectivity. This has reference to the fact that Pakistan does not allow India to have land routes to Central Asian nations. Sushma Swaraj also sought to highlight the double-speak of China in this regard. China has constructed roads in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir that is an inalienable part of India. She said that China should respect the sovereignty of other member countries while deciding on transnational roads.
Excellencies, connectivity with SCO countries is India's priority. We want connectivity to pave the way for cooperation and trust between our societies. For this, respect for sovereignty is essential. Inclusivity, transparency, and sustainability are imperative.
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a grouping of 8 countries. It includes China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and 4 Central Asian countries, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. India and Pakistan became full members of this grouping in June this year. Later, the External Affairs Minister also met Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev separately. Akhilesh Suman's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, much else has unfolded around the world this week. Here's a quick roundup of some other international news in Globe Watch. The White House has dismissed reports that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is about to be replaced. The US State Department also said that the Secretary of State remains committed to his job. The denials come amid reports from several news organizations that plans were being drawn up to replace Tillerson with CIA Chief Mike Pompeo. Pope Francis called for decisive measures to resolve the political crisis causing Muslim refugees from neighboring Myanmar to flee to Bangladesh. But just as in the first leg of his trip to Myanmar, he did not use the word Rohingya, which is contested by the Yangon government and military. In a speech before Bangladesh's president hours after arriving, the Pope instead spoke of refugees from Rakhine State. The exodus of Rohingyas from Rakhine State to Bangladesh was sparked by a military crackdown in response to Rohingya militant attacks on an army base and police post on August 25th. A Bangladeshi court has ordered the arrest of former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia for skipping a scheduled appearance as the main accused in the graft case. This is the third such warrant issued against the country's main opposition BNP chief in less than 2 months. 72-year-old Zia was supposed to resume delivering her unfinished statement defending herself in the Zia Orphanage Trust corruption case. US President Donald Trump fired back at British Prime Minister Theresa May over her criticism of his retweeting of anti-Muslim videos. He said that May should focus on terrorism in Britain. The spat between the two leaders arose after Trump posted anti-Islam videos on Twitter, originally published by a leader of a far-right British party. May had criticized the move, calling it wrong. This is the first time Trump faced rebuke from an ally. Australia is a step closer to legalizing same-sex marriage after lawmakers passed a bill in the Senate. Senators passed the bill 43-12 on Wednesday after rejecting proposed amendments by conservative lawmakers. The upper house bill will now be debated in the House of Representatives, where if approved, it will become law. It follows a historic national vote that showed a majority of Australians support changing the Marriage Act. And finally, some sports news now. At the FIFA World Cup draw that took place at the State Kremlin Palace in Moscow on Friday, all 32 qualified teams for the tournament discovered who they would face in the group stage. Spain's clash against Portugal is one of the most exciting encounters to look forward to. Hosts Russia will kick off next year's World Cup finals versus Saudi Arabia in Moscow, and defending champions Germany will start against Mexico after Friday's draw threw up some mouth-watering clashes. 5 times winners Brazil will face Switzerland in their first Group E match, with Costa Rica and Serbia making up one of the tougher-looking of the 8 groups. European champions Portugal will play Iberian neighbours Spain in their first match in Group B, while Argentina were placed in Group D with newcomers Iceland, Croatia and Nigeria. England will face the other debut nation Panama in Group G, in which Belgium are the top seeds. Unlike previous laborious draw ceremonies, Friday's event at the State Kremlin Palace was a quick-fire operation.
I would like to wish success to all the competing teams, and I call upon all loyal fans to come here to Russia to enjoy the finals of 2018.
And the world coming to Russia next year, 1.5 million people from all over the world, they will find that Russia is a welcoming country, that Russia is a warm country, that you can celebrate football in this country with the Russian people who are waiting just for that.
After speeches by Russian President Vladimir Putin and FIFA chief Gianni Infantino, the business of drawing the 32 balls from the 4 pots began with 8 World Cup greats, including Argentina's Diego Maradona and France's 1998 captain Laurent Blanc, assisting in the process. The month-long tournament, taking place across 11 host cities from Kaliningrad in the west to Ekaterinburg, 2,500 kilometers away in the east, begins on June 14. It will involve 64 matches in total, with the final taking place in Moscow's Luzhniki Stadium on July 15th. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television. Well, that's it on this edition of World Panorama. This is Frank Pereira signing off.